This is the AdHero Podcast, the podcast that reveals marketing tips, trends, and techniques by industry experts, insiders, and influencers. For years, AdSymble has helped businesses develop and launch campaigns to amplify their message, establish authority, and earn their lion's share of the market. This podcast will help you design and supercharge your plan to make an impact with valuable lessons you can apply in your business today. To get more information or start now, visit adsemble.com. That's ADSEMBLE.com. Let's get started.
Happy Friday, everybody. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Andrea.
Today, welcome to the show, AdHero Podcast. I'm Andrea Henley, your host, sitting in for Gino and Matthew. Thank you so much. I had so much fun on their show. They asked me to be a guest host. And when I thought about the topic, I said, what is my favorite topic to discuss? And it's brands. So welcome to the show, everybody. And I'll tell you more about my guest and why brands matter. So on today's show, we were talking to Lee Rafkin, who is a branding and marketing communications consultant based in New York. In addition to advising leading brands like Discovery, Networks, Estee Lauder, Medtronic, Nestle, and PepsiCo, very impressive, he named and branded several out-of-home USA organizations, OUTFRONT and Geopath, and Boldsight. So very impressive background, very diverse. Welcome to the show, Lee Rafkin.
Thank you, Andrea. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, you're coming to us from sunny Florida. I see palm trees behind you.
And where are you from? So in case
I am a COVID refugee who is hanging out in the hills of the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts.
And how is the weather there? It does look sunny.
It's sunny but cold. I would say it's 40 here, and I would guess it's 72 degrees there. 72 and sunny.
72 and sunny. And speaking of sunny, I have a little word from our sponsor that I need to acknowledge, who is Sun Vision Display. Sun Vision Display signs are an exciting new development for the digital signage industry. Using reflective color, LCD technology, Sun Vision Display signs are both sunlight readable, even in direct sunlight. That's amazing. And ultra low power. They actually use up to 95% less power than brightness of normal LCDs and LED signs. They offer a full HD resolution, 16.7 millimeter, colors, and come in a 32-inch screen size with a 43-inch size coming. Definitely check them out if you're in the market for outdoor signage, especially for a sunny location. Nice segue. Visit their website at sundisplay.com or YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Let's jump back in.
So wait, Andrea, can you repeat that website? Because I'm definitely in the market. That was great. What's that website again?
Yes, Sun Vision.
Sunvision.
Display.com. So Sun Vision Display.
Display singular.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. One long word. All right.
Very long word, but very sunny. We could use those here in Florida for sure. So man, what a year. The topics that we're talking about are branding. There's been some changes with some historical brands. Yeah. I saw you wrote a new article in regard to that. One of the brands being Aunt Jemima. Right.
I did write an article about it this summer when everything was going down, when things were really superheated, and it was like, does art follow life, or does life follow art? It was remarkable. It didn't surprise me though, because a brand is really an idea in the mind of your target audience, and it didn't surprise me at all in terms of what was happening this summer, because ideas were changing, and people were changing, and brands really are a reflection of people and a reflection of society. Sometimes brands lead, sometimes they follow. These brands that needed to go through a rebrand clearly were following, but they were a reflection of the age, and brands, like a lot of culture and popular culture, really does kind of reflect, the people, the consumer, and the consumer wanted and demanded change. Finally.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a good initiative on their part.
Yeah, it was
How
Aunt
do you-
Jemima that rebranded, right, to Pearl Milling Company, I think it is. Uncle
We gotta
Ben's
get
that
used to that
rebranded.
for sure.
Uncle Ben's rebranded, I think,
Uncle
to Ben's Original. Mr. Potato Head, they took the gender out of it, and now it's just Potato Head. So there are a lot of brands that that have been kind of caught up in this whole social equity story, and it's about time, because brands really, need to lead more than follow.
Do you feel like because we have been so conditioned to, we're conditioned to this brand Aunt Jemima and grabbing it, do you think that this is going to help them with market share? Or is there a place now where they could be disrupted by maybe a new maple syrup that is relevant today that could sweep up some of that market share due to the rebrand? What are your thoughts?
It's a great question. Brands are both rational and emotional, and people buy brands for a set of rational and emotional reasons. And brands like Aunt Jemima, I think, were more of an emotional than a rational brand. People weren't buying Aunt Jemima because it had this character. I think they were buying this brand because they had an emotional connection, maybe some fond memories of eating, pancakes as a kid. It really kind of reflects a different age, so to speak, right? And so with a rebrand, I think what you're really kind of getting at is people's emotions, and I think the jury is still out if they're gonna still have that same connection that they had before. These are big brands. Aunt Jemima, I think, is owned by, is it Quaker or Unilever or one of the big companies? I know Uncle Ben's that rebranded is owned by Mars. These are billion-dollar companies, and these are big battleships that are very slow to turn around and slow to respond. And I think all of these big companies were kind of slow to respond, but it's a good thing that they did respond. So whether Aunt Jemima is going to keep up being the #1 brand in the category is yet to be seen. It's about how people transfer that emotional bond that they had with the old brand to the new brand. And I think we're going to see.
I think we've been accustomed to it. We've been used to it. We're grab it on the shelf. So having that marketing behind it, it could help or hurt them. So it also opened the space for somebody else. Another brand real quick that I was thinking about, I love household items, Old Spice, very historical brand. Grandpa's used it, my husband, but it's really connected now with the younger generation. What do you make of that? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, they've had tremendous success with their brand, and it wasn't for a cultural reason. It was just trying to connect with a new audience.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
Old Spice was clearly, your father's Oldsmobile. It was an old-fashioned legacy brand. I think there were, again, an emotional connection because it reminded people maybe of a family member, my dad or my grandpa, who used to use it. But it was clearly a very old-fashioned brand. I believe when I was a kid, the ads had a sailor character that represented Old Spice. So clearly the brand needed to stay relevant, right? And to create, relevancy. The brand used kind of humor and edgy humor and irony, and they really kind of became a lot more relevant through the use of humor. So humor can do that because humor is one of the highest order emotional things that people feel and respond to. And in the case of P&G, which owns Old Spice, I think they did a great job.
I think that what's interesting to me is they kept the logo the same, right? But the conversation changed. And I think that's great because you don't lose your core consumer that's already been accustomed to this brand and has been buying it.
But they're most likely dead.
Huh?
That consumer is most likely dead.
They're dead, so we have to engage with new ones.
Yeah.
Exactly. But anyways, I always thought of it as like, ew, stinky, but they have brand new products too. That
I think ooh, stinky would be a really good tagline for the brand.
But this smells good.
Stinky.
So, I mean, I'm not really the demo for this, but I thought it was an interesting conversation piece.
Yeah,
But
no, I mean, I think it's, honestly, just to take the humor out of it, they survived. And there are a lot of kind of old legacy brands that don't survive because they're no longer relevant. But Old Spice, they invested a lot of money by creating an all new character, which really personified the brand. They really executed really well. They changed the conversation from, oh, that's an old brand, to, oh, that's a really funny, ironic, edgy brand. And
yeah.
people responded. And so I think it's great. I personally don't use the brand, however.
Well, you should. No, but hats off to Aunt Jemima and Old Spice for making
Sure.
the changes necessary that they
Absolutely.
needed. But let's
Absolutely.
jump into why we're here. You
Yeah.
are the expert in branding and marketing, and I love to talk
Yeah.
about this topic.
I've
So-
done it a lot. I don't know if I'm an expert.
Lee, why do brands matter? That's the question. That's why we're here. We want to hear from you, your expertise, your narrative on that.
So, to back it up, I really do believe this. Brands they're not a tagline. They're not an ad campaign. They're not a logo. Brands, as I said, are an idea in the mind of the target audience, and knowing what that idea is and figuring out how you want to get from point A to point B, literally from what you currently are to what you desire to be, takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of great branding work. So brands are an idea, and how you kind of mold that idea is really what they're all about. And I like to say that brands are really four things. They communicate who you are and what you stand for and why people should care, right? Very important. They are kind of a shorthand that people think about you. You're offering people a way to think about you. You're giving them an idea in their mind, a way to remember and recommend you. They also really are kind of like an internal manifesto, because they guide decision making. They rally people around a single voice and a single vision and a single brand. And they also act as kind of a strategic roadmap that kind of helps a brand or a company make decisions. When your decision is on brand, it's the right decision. So if you're living up to the values of what your brand is and what it stands for, you can kind of use that as guardrails or a map. And so it's both an internal tool and an external tool. But brands are really, they're not how they look, how they sound. They're really a much deeper emotional thing. They're an idea in the mind and the heart of a consumer. And so, it doesn't surprise me at all, based on what we were just talking about, that brands, have had to change, because brands really are ideas, and ideas need to evolve.
And I think the brands are that bright light, right? That make you feel a certain way. If I'm, identifying, I'm like drinking a Starbucks, coffee versus a McDonald's, coffee's coffee, but it's how it makes you feel, how you identify with it. So I think, what is the percentage, I guess, of, people that have a great brand? What's the value of having a strong brand versus maybe a mediocre brand?
It's a great question. It's a great question. There are brands who are leaders, and there are brands who are challengers, and each one kind of plays a different role. Leader brands really kind of put a stake in the sand and say, this is what I stand for, this is what makes me different, and this is why people should care. And then because they're the leader, they may have a first mover advantage. They may have the largest market share in a particular category. And then other brands, challenger brands, have to kind of pick off little pieces of what the leader brand stands for to kind of create a niche on their own. So, great brands make a stand, tell people what they stand for, make an emotional connection with the consumer, and really put a stake in the sand and say, I own this. This is what makes me different. This is why people really should care. So, great brands are also brands that continue to evolve and stay relevant. And that's the eternal challenge of a brand manager, is to how to know your audience well enough so that you can stay relevant for that audience moving forward. And that's really the process of branding. Brands are living, breathing things that constantly evolve, and they need to be, worked on. They need to have some renovation, just like a house has to have some renovation.
What would you say to a brand that's doing pretty well, status quo, maybe grows a little percentage year over year, but kind of stagnant, complacent? Sometimes people don't know how to get out of their own way, knowing that they're capturing a big part of the market share. but how do they get to that next level? What goes into a rebrand? What do you do when you sit down and say, okay, you're status quo, but that's not good enough. There's more market share out there to get. What goes into those conversations to initiate a rebrand, based on what you've done in your experience in rebranding some major companies and taking, it's such a risk, but it's such a high reward and payoff. What is your process of, what goes into a rebrand, I guess?
The very first thing is consumer insight and knowing your customer, whether it's B2C or B2B, understanding the value exchange and the connection that you have with the consumer, and understanding who your consumer is. It's all driven by consumer insight. So for me, I'm always looking for the white space opportunity, the unmet needs. This sounds like a cliche, but the things that keep the consumer up at night, because what those things are really opportunities for a brand to kind of own that idea. So it's really the first and foremost, it's understanding, who your audience is, who your consumer is, what they stand for, what keeps them up at night, what they worry about, what needs are not being met, and continuing to renovate so that you can meet those needs. So the first question I always ask is, who is my audience? Then the second question I always ask is, what business am I in? And I don't mean, I'm in the outdoor advertising business, or I'm in the automotive sales business. I mean, in a much broader sense, what kind of a elevated service am I providing to my consumer? One of my favorite brands is Nike, and Phil Knight famously said, for the longest time, I thought Nike was an athletic shoe and apparel company. But I was wrong, because what I really learned over the course of my career is that Nike was really an experience company, and it was all about enhancing people's sense of accomplishment through fitness and lifestyle. So I'm not just a shoe company. I bring people, a much higher order benefit, because I'm about the experience and elevating the experience of fitness and helping people achieve, greatness through their own personal lifestyle and fitness. So he understood that brands really need to place themselves at a much higher level. And the thing that I would say is that consumers choose among brands. They don't choose a brand. So you walk into a supermarket or a store, or today it's really, you log on to Amazon, and you're not just selecting a single brand. You're looking at a whole set of competitors within a space, and broadening who you are and what you stand for allows you to compete in a much bigger way. So that's the second question I ask. The third question I always ask is, what do I stand for? That's the traditional positioning question. What do I stand for? What's my purpose? Why should people care about what I do? Beyond just making money, what do I stand for? And what drives me every day? So that's important. And the fourth question is, what makes me different? Hopefully what you stand for makes you different, but differentiation from other competitors, both near in and far out, is really super important. And then finally, the last question I ask is, why should people care? And that's the toughest question to answer of all. That's really all about emotion and emotional content, and what your brand stands for, and the connection you make with people. People care about certain brands, and they don't really care about other brands. And I've always wondered, why is that? Two brands that offer the same thing, like, Toyota versus Nissan, or BMW versus, Audi. BMW is a great car, but it stands for something. It stands for maybe engineering performance, or exhilaration, or the thrill of driving a really tight, fast, great, kind of sports car. That is an emotional thing that it stands for. And that's why people should care about it. And that's why people do buy. When you look at a car, you run the numbers, you look at the gas mileage, you look at, what the cost to own is, possibly. Those are all rational things. But the reason you buy that car is because you love it, and you have made some sort of an emotional connection to it. So I ask those 5 questions. Who's my audience? Really who they are, meaning what they worry about. What business am I in? Number 2. Yeah, exactly. What do I stand for? What makes me different? And why should people care? That's like an essential kind of brand audit, and that will provide 90% of the answers. And then for a company like OUTFRONT, you develop territories that are based on that strategy. So we discovered through that process that OUTFRONT really stood for innovation and being, forward-looking and being, innovative in the soul of a fast-moving, fast-charging organization. And we landed on this concept of being out in front. And the beauty of naming, because it's both art and science, but the art part of it is finding a word that really people have an emotional response to, that stands for something and makes them different and makes people care about it. OUTFRONT was a great name because we were able to use out in the name, which kind of said, hey, if you own the word, you own the category. So if I have OUTFRONT in my brand name, I'm hoping that makes you own the category a little bit. And then OUTFRONT is a great idea because it makes you think of the brand as being out in front always, leading from the front, being innovative, being fast charging, that sort of thing. So everything kind of starts from strategy. And then for OUTFRONT, we developed a bunch of naming territories that were based on that strategy of being a leader and being out front. And that's how we finally got to
OUTFRONT. And I was at CBS Outdoor when they separated from CBS, and it's a totally
they spun it up.
Different company now. It's a totally different company. We were always proud of the brand CBS, it was so branded, but I don't even remember that now because their branding now is so strong and they're such a different company and such a different conversation, and hats off to you for doing such a great job with that. And speaking of that, I mean, they separated from CBS, now they're OUTFRONT. Most people don't even know that because if they got in the industry, recently, they don't even remember that. Question on that, just kind of changing gears. iHeart and Clear Channel Outdoor separated. Do you think it would have been wise for Clear Channel Outdoor to do a rebrand, or were they the brand that they had, is working for them? Because I think
so. The one thing that Clear Channel has, I think the one thing that Clear Channel has as an advantage in the market is that their parent company is no longer called Clear Channel. So for good and for bad, they get to own all of that equity that's associated with the legacy brand Clear Channel, right? I think Clear Channel is the radio business now and the outdoor advertising business, but the core music business and no, actually it's not the radio business, right? So the core business is called iHeart now, right? So, they could have they certainly could have benefited from a refresh, but they've decided to own Clear Channel because the parent kind of, for better or for worse, kind of didn't go with it.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting to rebrand an entire organization. Like they've done a great job with that. But
one of the things that I would share on that, Andrea, is just that, with OUTFRONT as well as with a lot of the other naming jobs that I've done and brand jobs that I've done, it's really, in my mind, it's about involving the client and making the big decisions theirs. It's never mine. So what I do is I lead a process. I create what I call a brand council. I get the right people on the bus, in the room, at the conference table. And I've really found, 20 plus years of doing this, I just was adding stuff up in anticipation of this call. I've worked with 100 clients on 4 continents. Yeah, I've done a lot of work, and I've worked with a lot of people, basically. Americans, Germans, Chinese, Russians. And the thing that I found that is universal, that really works over the course of doing this for a while, is that if you get people on the bus and you make the project, you make them own the work. You make them feel like, not just feel like, but are part of the decision. They own it, and when you own it, you evangelize it, right? So when you own something, and when it's your own work, you work a little bit harder to activate it, to make it successful, to evangelize it, to spread the word among all your employees, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the process I think it's a much better result because it reflects what people, it reflects the internal culture of the company.
Right, because when do you get involved? How do you get involved with Lee? I want to do a rebrand. What is your process of getting new clients? Is it mostly referrals? What is your process currently? You've worked with Estee Lauder, you've worked with some huge brands, Nestle. You're so established now? Do you work with
My
smaller startups, or how do we get involved with you?
I do. I'm a generalist, so I've worked, I work in healthcare, I work in media and advertising, I work in technology, consumer brands. I really feel like cross-pollinating projects with insights from different categories is what really brings a fresh perspective. So I don't specialize in one particular vertical.
That's great.
I have a website. People can do it on my website, which is rafkin.com, R-A-F like in Frank, K-I-N.com. But most of my work comes from word of mouth and referrals, and clients move, and they move from company to company, and sometimes they bring me with them on new projects, which is always really exciting. I've worked with clients over a course of 12 or 15 years. I'm working with a client right now who I've worked with. This is his third company in the healthcare space.
Nice.
And so that's really gratifying. I love working, I like working with good people. So that's always nice.
So that's great.
People like you, Andrea.
I know we don't fit in one box. We're very versatile. I've become the matchmaker, I guess.
Entrepreneurial, driven, positive attitude. All of these great things. That's you.
I love talking about all things. Branding is so important. I've run across, customers and clients that don't even have a brand. What would you say to them? How would you get them to say, look, you've survived pretty well the way you are, but, have you ever thought about doing a rebrand or potentially, branding yourself? How do you get somebody that's maybe status quo, but wants to go to the next level? What would you say to them is the importance of having a brand will take, separate you from this and that? What would you say to get people?
So the thing that makes small business people the most excited is hearing about the ROI that they get from a rebrand or from an initial branding strategy process. And there is empirical data in the books, lots of studies that have been made that strongly branded companies are worth more, charge more, have higher prices, have higher employee satisfaction, all of the good metrics people are looking for with a strong brand. And I think the reason is that it helps people understand what this organization stands for, and people love to buy and associate themselves with organizations, whether they're profit or nonprofit, that have good values that they associate with, that they want to do business with. So the first thing I always do is saying that there's something in the field of branding called brand valuation. When I was in business school, my professor taught me that, I'll never forget it, it's like the only thing I remembered basically, was that the value of a brand is the difference on the shelf at a supermarket, the difference between the price of a generic product and the price that a consumer is willing to pay for a branded product.
Perfect.
I love that. Differential is goodwill. It's goodwill on your balance sheet, but it's also the literal value of a brand. So basically, if you can convince a prospect, in the outdoor advertising business, for instance, that they need a brand, the very first thing you should really use to convince them is the financial ROI discussion, because it's been proven that having a strong brand delivers a better business.
I'm writing these down.
So that's the first reason. Then the second reason I would give them is really that it differentiates you from your competitors. And again, people make decisions among brands, not a single brand, right? So when you're shopping for a car, I always go back to cars because I'm a car nut, but when you're shopping for cars, most likely you are comparing a couple, 2-3 different vehicles or 2 different models, and you're choosing from among that competitive set. And that's, I think, what Phil Knight really understood. If he was just about being a company that stands for sneakers and apparel, maybe, at the store shelf, maybe their sneakers are just as good or maybe not just as good as a New Balance, so I'll buy a New Balance. But if Nike stands for the experience of enhancing people's lives through sports and fitness, then that's a brand that I want to associate with. So, there's the quantitative and the qualitative reasons, but usually with a small business person, the quantitative reason is the first one I would go with.
So what do you stand for is really behind the brand. And that's what people need to really understand. What do they stand for? What is their mission statement? And how do you want to project that onto the day-to-day consumer and get new customers? So
especially new consumers, because millennials, it's been proven, there have been all these studies about millennials and Gen Z coming up behind them who are, you know, in the next couple of years going to be the largest demographic group. They're going to surpass the baby boomer generation in terms of spending power and disposable income. And study after study after study has proven that millennials and Gen Z after them buy products and brands because they approve of what they stand for. And it's something like 80% of all Gen Z consumers buy brands because they agree with that brand's point of view, worldview, you know, appreciate what they stand for. And it matters to them. It matters to them way more than boomers, it ever did for boomers.
Our generation didn't care. We were just, this is what you had. And
well, what do you mean our generation? What do you mean our generation? I'm not a boomer.
Well, I'm not, yeah, you're not a millennial either. That's me.
Neither are you, by the way. You're a Gen
I'm
X.
mama millennial. You know, the younger audience.
I will tell you, I'm on the cusp. I'm on the cusp. I admit it. I'm on the cusp.
I'm Gen X, 100%. But you know, it's about the you know, I have a 17-year-old daughter. It's about the they want to be part of the conversation. They do research like crazy because they have the ability to research anything. We didn't, and you know, our generation, we were limited, but that's so important. And I think it's even important for historical brands to also you know, invite these younger audiences into the conversation. What do they want? What do they care about? You know,
absolutely.
Take that to the next level.
There's absolutely true. There's never been a more important time for brands, and I don't say that, you know, lightly. I'm not trying to throw away these lines. It's really true. You know, brands today have an incredible voice, and it's because consumers want them to. That really, you know, they have a voice not just in commerce. They have a voice way beyond, you know, what their profit line is every year, or what kind of revenue they're doing, or how many stores they opened, or how many employees they have. It's really about what they do in the world beyond commerce, you know, and I'm not just talking about doing good and giving money. It's literally just, you know, what is their culture? And culture is brand. You know, brand is people, people is brand, and a brand is really about a culture, right? So because it's an internal roadmap and it kind of provides the guardrails for how you operate as an organization, it's more important than ever because people really care about it more than ever.
I'm going to let you have the final thought. Why do brands matter, Lee? One sentence. I know we talked a lot. How do we sum it up?
How do we sum up brands and why brands matter? Because you know, brands are really, I would say, brands are a roadmap. Because brands are a roadmap. You know, internally, they help people make better decisions and operate businesses and organizations better. And from the consumer standpoint, it's a roadmap because it really helps consumers navigate all these different brand options that they have so that they choose you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being my guest. I mean, we could go on for hours. I know you and I.
Andrea.
We've bonded.
So what's your next gig? Are you like hosting? What's your next gig? Are you hosting Jeopardy next? Is that your next gig?
Yes, next. Well, how can people find you? Oh, you gave your website. Let's highlight that again. Your website. Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on?
Visit my website.
I'm
everywhere. Sure, I'm on LinkedIn.
Your website.
I mean, my website has my email and my phone, but it's rafkin.com. My email is Lee, L-E-E is my name, @rafkin.com. Visit my website. There's lots of cases there and lots of examples of the kind of work that I do.
Your expertise is invaluable, and you know, one of the things during this whole shutdown, or that, you know, we've gotten to know each other even better on a personal level, and I feel like, you know, investment of time and personal relationships is definitely invaluable as well. So I really thank you for being my guest on the AdHero podcast.
Thank you.
I'm Andrea Henley Guest Host. We'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much. Thank you again. My name is Andrea Henley. I'm your AdHero podcast host today. Please check out our sponsor, Sun Vision Display, on all their social media channels and at sunvisiondisplay.com. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to Matthew. and Gino for allowing me to take the reins on your baby today.
Want to advertise big and build massive brand authority at the same time? It's easier than you think. Open Display by AdSymble lets you advertise on digital billboards nationwide. Just go to opendisplay.com for a free account to get started.
It's an official notification.